I literally just uploaded, but I also just got my hair done, so let's roll. Hi, my name is Yena. I am a modern ajumma, and these are my favorite books that I read in 2022. It took me a really long time to think how I wanted to tackle this because in 2022 I read 137 books. I'm also a Libra. How do I choose a favorite? How do I choose favorites? Thank God I only have one child. So among everything that I read this year, I picked 15 that just continued to stay with me all year long and carved themselves a special place within my heart. And I'm just gonna go by not ranking, but in order that I read them. Like, look at this. This is what we're dealing with, people. This is my setup, by the way. I'm on my desk in front of a window. In January, I read Wow, No, Thank You. And I believe I read this because I had just watched And Just Like That. And that was my first time hearing about Samantha Irby. So read this, I think purely because of the title. I mean, I have heard of Samantha Irby from other booktubers mentioning her, but I never really, it never really sunk in until I watched the show and saw that she was one of the writers. And I love And Just Like That. I love Sex and the City, not a gatekeeper like all the other bitches who are hating on And Just Like That. That's all I'm gonna say because we're here to talk about books. I started with Wow, No, Thank You on audio because Claire reads books, mentioned that her audiobooks read by the author are so good. And I'm here to confirm that that is the case. Yes, they're so good that I had to own them. I had to read more of Samantha Irby, and yeah, I was like, yes, please tell me more about your diarrhea and chronic Crohn's disease. I want to know. So I'm in love with Samantha Irby. I am going with Wow, No, Thank You because it was the first one that I read. Something about her Midwesternness just really appealed to me, and like I met a couple people from the Midwest this year, and I ended up really liking them and vibing with them really well. In the past, I've always thought if I were to go on vacation somewhere, it would have to be some like major city or someplace like a national park, either or. But now, going forward, I really want to visit Midwestern towns and cities and suburbs. Like, nothing sounds more appealing to me at the moment than visiting some random but beloved mom and pop restaurant and shops in like Cincinnati or somewhere. Love Samantha Irby. I love all of her books. She has a new one coming out this year. I can't wait to read that one. I highly recommend. I read Excellent Women by Barbara Pym back in February. We eat with our eyes first. And I loved this Orla Keeley cover from this Virago Modern Classics hardcover edition that I first saw from my booktube BFF, Ben of Dumantidote, talking about it. He mentioned mid-20th century Britishisms and women and cups of tea, and I was like, I am in. I need this. And I was so delighted by the names, the most British names I have ever heard of. Really what stayed in my mind all year long was the dynamic of main character Mildred Lathbury, single lady in her 30s, who, if she'd only lived in our present 21st century times, she would have lived the life. But alas, she lived in the 1950s, I believe, where in a small village, was it London? Oh God, details are fuzzy, but what remains in my brain is that she is the poor spinster who doesn't have much means. We're assuming not much in looks. Her best friends are her fellow spinsters, the people that she works with at her local church, her local like place that she volunteers in her community and where she takes care of people, does the dishes, sells like used stuff for fundraising purposes, makes endless pots of tea. The lady who comes to maid for her like once every other week. All of these people are just like, poor Mildreding her, pushing her towards a better life spent with some man, whether it be like the local vicar who she's always had this like brotherly / flirty relationship with, or this newcomer who just moved into her building, who is a married man, but he's like hot and dashing and exciting. Or this other new friend who's more suave, more intellectual. And in this world of excellent women, where everyone is like, Mildred, you should do this. Mildred, do this for me. Mildred, do that. The end, especially when this was written in, was so vindicating and so fist in the air, like, yeah, girl power. So I love this story. Obviously, a lot, because I'm so fuzzy on the details, I should reread this. And once I do, it will be such a delight. But I loved this story. I loved the writing from Barbara Pym. This is fun. I read The English Patient by Michael Ondaatje in February because I watched the film in January to like gear myself up for like Valentine's Day vibes, big romance, which that movie very much is. So then I read the book in February, and I think I said this in my February vlog that when I was in high school, this guy knows that I watch a lot of movies and asked for like a spicy film recommendation. Like, what's the hottest movie that he can watch? And I unironically, honestly told him to watch Before Sunrise. And he did, and he was so pissed at me. Because, you know what he expected. And then he watched that movie, and he was like, what the... I still stand by that recommendation, by the way. So when I watched the film, and then I read this book, I kind of felt like somebody did that to me. Because this, beautiful book is kind of nothing like the film. Like, the film vibes are like, ooh, heavily romantic, hot, sweaty lust, Catherine and Amashi. And then this book is much more, I would say quiet, much more adult, much more grown up. I believe I liken this to like a big steaming platter of broccoli as far as the reading experience felt. But this book is about Hannah and Kip, and the ending, the way that Michael Ondaatje writes the ending to the story. God, I feel it in my heart. I was like, oh, this is how adults are. This is how adults think. This is how adults feel. Oh my goodness. Like goals, I gotta get there myself. I highly recommend reading this. I love this. And I also highly recommend the film if you want those vibes that I previously mentioned. In March, I read The Song of Achilles because everybody was talking about it, a few years ago. And so I was like, I grew up reading Greek myths. I watched every single episode of Hercules and Xena, Warrior Princess. That was my jam. And it was so fun. I love Patroclus. I wanted to be his best friend. I wanted to be his baby mama. I cried at the end. So I was like, yes, more Madeline Miller. Circe. Oh my God. I just cried throughout the book. The Song of Achilles, I felt like he's my best friend. Circe, I feel like, oh, she is me. Not that our life experiences are any way alike, just she is the woman. She is the every woman. She is goddess. That feeling when just after disappointment upon disappointment upon disappointment, we're human beings, we're immortal. Girlfriend is a goddess. She is immortal. A lifetime spent this way. And yes, kind of like with the English Patient's ending, Circe's end, so mature, so beautiful, so heartbreaking. I love her. I love this book. I love Madeline Miller. Highly recommend both. I can't wait for the adaptation that will hopefully come soon. I am like manifesting a revival in Greek mythology stories and interest from the world where HBO Max will finally freaking make this, and we will be watching the series Circe in our very near future. In April, I read E.M. Forster's A Room with a View. Watched the film for the first time, I think, last year or the previous year. Loved it. Helena Bonham Carter. And so, of course, I had to read, like, if the film was that great, I could only imagine how much better the novel would be, and was instantly delighted. The writing was so great, the story more fleshed out, and each character immediately felt like, oh, I know who you are. I just kept, like, flipping the pages, muttering, oh, Charlotte. Oh, Charlotte. And like, Lucy, come on, Lucy, come on. There's Blossoming Love. This is one of the few books that I read about young people that I really liked this year. Of course, that was written in 1908. And the greatest surprise, the biggest delight I found from reading this novel is the character of Mr. Emerson. Oh, I love Mr. Emerson. I will remain fondly thinking of Mr. Emerson for the rest of my life, and will try to retain Mr. Emerson vibes like all year long, all life long. This is so delightful. Also in April of this year, I read Motherhood by Sheila Heti. I heard about it just from BookTube, everyone praising Sheila Heti, how big brainy motherhood is. And I was like, oh, I'm not so smart, but like, let's try. And what I found was I just felt like I was in Sheila Heti's brain, or I was reading her diaries, or I was her best friend and she was confiding in me her thoughts regarding being a woman, being a mother, historically what it meant to be a woman, being a mother, and just passage after passage. It took my breath away. I was so moved. This cover is gorgeous. And so I also read Pure Color this year, which is again like being in Sheila Heti's brain. And so the two books that I read from Sheila Heti this year, of the two, I probably prefer Motherhood. I love this book. It's, I would say, one of my favorite books of all time. Love this. And then in May of this year, I read Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, which I purchased the Virago Modern Classics hardbound edition. And oh my goodness, is this, I would say, the definition of a perfect novel. She's big, she's beautiful, she is a page turner. And again, another story about a 20-something-year-old that I loved, but was written in the early 20th century. I was immediately taken by Daphne du Maurier's writing. Descriptions were so gorgeous, like hold my beering, Donna Tartt's The Secret History. The character portrayals are so memorable, palpable. Yeah, this was fun. This was entertaining. This was vibrant. This was really, really good. If you haven't read it yet, I highly recommend. If you're somebody who is intimidated by the classics, I highly recommend trying Rebecca. In June, I read Korean American by Eric Kim. This is a cookbook. I raved about it in my June wrap-up. Obviously stand by it. Like I was saying, that even if you don't cook, even if you don't have interest in Korean cooking, I still recommend reading this. I still stand by that. It's just as a book, it is such a good read. Eric Kim's voice is so sweet and caring, and he implores you to call your mom, to have more conversations with your family, so that you know your personal family history, to know where you come from, to understand why you are the way you are. This is his pandemic baby book, where he lived at home during lockdown and spent that time just talking to his mom, talking about their family, talking about their family traditions. and Eric Kim is from Atlanta. There are quite a lot of Koreans in Atlanta, but most Korean Americans do live in California, in LA, or New York / the tri-state area. But that made this feel that much more special, more precious, more interesting, seeing like his differences of what Korean American means to him as opposed to what it means to me, being a Southern Californian Korean and LA Korean. And the biggest plus is that the food itself is actually really great, really tasty. Just everything about this reading experience was it made me so happy. Like, I didn't even ignore reading the ingredients lists, the part that everybody always kind of skips when they read a cookbook. I read everything cover to cover. So fun, so good, so heartfelt, so sincere, so genuine, so real. In July, I read Sorrow and Bliss by Meg Mason that I borrowed a physical copy from the library. Cackled, snot-nosed, wept, clutched my heart throughout the reading experience of this book. I laughed, I cried, I immediately ran out and bought so that I could own a physical copy. More so than the main character herself, so invested in everyone else. The cast of characters in this story is truly amazing, and what really made the book for me, like, so good, so fun to read. Like, the supporting cast is the most supportive I've ever seen. It is a story about mental health, a mental disorder, and a pretty big detail with that is the mental disorder isn't named. And I've seen a lot of people having a hard time with that. But personally, I found that to be what really made this book, because that way you're not too hung up on what her mental disorder is. And you're that much more accepting of that she has a mental disorder. And again, the ending of this, I just love that, again, more of that, this is adult behavior. This is how you handle adult relationships. I need to be like this. I love this. This summer, I read Charles Heathcote's Doris. And really, actually, I think this summer I learned of who Charles Heathcote is. I'm very sorry. I know that I've been doing this for 2 years, but I don't know who the biggest booktubers are, I really don't know a lot of booktubers. I'm very sorry about that. But anecdotally, I didn't know who Ed Sheeran is. I mean, I've heard of the name. I couldn't tell you a single title of his songs. I know that he's a musician. I could pick him out of a lineup because I did watch Game of Thrones and was very into that. But sorry, a longer anecdote. I watched that film yesterday, which is about a world where the Beatles never existed, but one guy remembered, and so he becomes famous for all of the Beatles songs. And in this story, in this world, Ed Sheeran is in it. I was watching this movie with my husband and was like, in this world, is it also a fantasy that Ed Sheeran is that big, famous? And he was like, are you kidding me? So that's just who I am. So in short, I discovered the existence of this wonderful British booktuber named Charles Heathcote. And I started with Doris, immediately delighted by all of the characters, his world building within this Northern England village of Partridge Mews. I had so much fun getting into the cultural details of this place. I just love that experience when you're reading something and you're also kind of constantly on your phone Googling stuff because the book mentions something that you don't know, and then it takes you down a Wikipedia spiral. I love that. It makes you more invested in the story. And so I spent a very enjoyable summer this year getting into the rest of the Doris series and An Heir to Murder, which takes place within the Doris multiverse. It was wonderful getting to know Doris Copeland, and her life, who is a upper middle class woman in her 70s, living in the north of England, a place I've never been to, but nevertheless felt so similar to my own life, my own way of life. Even though there were so many little cultural details that were new to me, that I never heard of before. I believe that I called Doris a mix between Lucy Ricardo and Don Corleone from The Godfather. Like, she's that bitch. And I love her. And in September, I read Oh William by Elizabeth Strout, just because I heard Kieran talk about this book. And for whatever reason, I was so intrigued. So I just picked it up and read it on a library ebook. Oh William is the third installment of this quartet series. And I just dipped into the third installment blind. But I was not lost at all. I was so enthralled by Elizabeth Strout's writing. I called her like an Anglo-Saxon Elena Ferrante. I immediately had to read My Name is Lucy Barton, which is the first of the series. And immediately, Elizabeth Strout just became one of my favorite writers that I've encountered so far. The story of Lucy Barton captivated me so much, like stole my heart. Elizabeth Strout's voice stole my heart. I don't know if you also play this game, but like if I were to be a writer, I am not a writer by the way, but if I were to be a writer, whose voice would I want to, like steal, like have? I think mine would be Elizabeth Strout. Like if I could sing like anybody, who would it be? It's either Whitney Houston or Jewel. Like go big or go home. But I started Oh William in September. I finished the series by December, and I, from here on out, love Elizabeth Strout. Will continue to read anything and everything by Elizabeth Strout. Instant favorite. In October, I read White on White by Aysegul Savas. I saw some booktubers that I really admire and respect raving about this, borrowed a physical copy from the library. I think within the first 10 pages of reading this, I knew that this is the top books of the year for me. I messaged Nathan of Nathan's Nook because I just come back from my trip to Korea where I met him in person and we were talking about stuff and then I was reading this and I wanted to elaborate on the stuff that we talked about because this inspired me to. And when a book does that, like, oh, so special, so special. The writing is brilliant. The story is alluring, haunting, eerie. Oh, this is just another deep, adult, grown-up book. Grown-ups behave this way, although maybe in this case, more treacherously. Almost felt like a book sent from the future, sent to you so that you can know what's possibly could be in store for you. Yeah, absolutely magical. Highly recommend. And this December, I read for the first time Claire Keegan. I started with The Forester's Daughter and Small Things Like These, which is a very Christmassy December book. But I believe that my favorite of the three that I read is Forster. I just read this, but I know that it will continue to live in my brain. Immediately fell in love with Claire Keegan's writing. I've heard of the whole, like, the Irish are very good at writing, are very good with the words, are very good at the storytelling. Oh my God, I had no idea how much so. Like, yeah, James Joyce, Oscar Wilde. But at the moment, I'm like, Claire Keegan. Like, yes, Claire Keegan. I loved all three of these. And I'm so excited to read more Claire Keegan and future Claire Keegan. Also in December, I discovered and read Samantha Hunt. Oh my gosh, I was so captured by her spooky, magical, mystical, scarily good writing. And The Seas in particular is incredible. The foreword by Maggie Nelson, who I've still yet to read, really summed up everything how I felt about reading The Seas, where it not only enraptures you, captivates you, steals your heart, but it also shows you glimpses of how people in small towns are unable to escape their fate, what motivates people to make the choices that they do. But again, it's really just the voice, Samantha Hunt's writing, that I'm absolutely in love with. I need more. I need for the rest of my life. This is utterly beautiful, heart-rending, tear-jerking, heart-clutching. I felt drowned in emotions. Is it the ocean? Is it my tears? I don't know. My heart. And last but not least, in December, I read Boulder by Eva Balthasar. This book is so powerful. I wrote in a comment to Bibliosophie that this book sprang out from her pages and erotically asphyxiated me into submission. That's how I felt. You know, it's just one of those cases where I never thought she'd be my type, but damn, I am in love. Love, lust, who cares? I am yours. Like, she stole my heart out of nowhere, and I am so intrigued by Eva Balthasar. I'm like a love-struck slave, needing to know more, wanting to be handcuffed, willing for anything as long as it means more. It's really hard not to talk about this book in a non-sexual manner. It's so slim. It's a fast read, but so powerful. Like, punch you in the face, grab you by the hair, wring you by the neck, forcing you to love her. and you do. I do. I'm gonna stop. I do have a few honorable mentions. I read Cold Comfort Farm in April after hearing Ben of Doom Antidote talk about it, and I also found this Penguin Classics Deluxe version with this gorgeous illustrated by Roz Chast cover. Like, absolute artwork. Absolute art. And it was fun. I believe I called it Big Virgo energy. Fabulous cast of characters. Flora, our main character, she's so fun. I want to be like her. Again, like a British mid 20th century literature that I think is more for mass audience as opposed to like brainy lit fic. But I had a good time. This was fun. Love in the Big City. I read this in June. This was both fun, heartbreaking, sincere, honest. Like, one of the most Korean books that I've read. Like, authentically Korean, authentically LGBTQ. I really love this too. Cult Classic by Sloane Crosley, I read in June. So much fun. Highlighted to my heart's content. She is such a like zippy, quippy writer. This was like a TikTok of a book. I believe I said this was big Pisces energy. Maybe her sarcastic, sardonic tone of voice may not be for everybody, but goddamn, what a ride. What a thrill. What fun. Oh my God. I can't even, oh my God. And last but not least, I read Kitchen Princess. Oh my God, I can't. I read Kitchen Princess in April, like around the spring summertime, just on my phone. And I just remember having so much fun. This was not a manga that I knew about before, because I think this came out in like the 2010s. And I would never have picked this up on my own, but I did hear, I think it was Emmy talk about this. So I gave it a go. And just in that time of my life when I was really stressed out about stuff and had a lot of times when I was just out and I had to wait for a while. It was just so easy to read on my phone in like short spurts, getting to know Najika and this cast of characters at this cooking school. And this is so heartwarming, so cute, really sweet, really fun. It was just exactly what I needed at the moment. And I'm so happy that I have these omnibuses. This was like something that, 15 years ago I would have been like, please. But at the age of 36 in 2022, don't knock it till you try it. So that was my 2022 reading year, best of the best. I am not doing like a worst reads of 2022. I never do that. I don't like doing that. If anything, I'll just like write it in the description box. I just don't like being negative, but any more negative than I already am. Even though when I look at my 2022 reads objectively and I compare it to my 2021, which is when I started BookTube, and really 2020 is when I got back into reading again. This year I read so much more fiction than anything else, which is really uncommon. Like before I would read a pretty balanced diet of nonfiction, like historical fiction, historical nonfiction, art books. That has been really notably absent this year. More manga, However, this year I diversified a lot more by reading more ebooks, more audio, more like randoms from the library, and that's truly been a game changer. So in 2023, I think I'm going to try to mix in more cookbooks, art books, nonfiction of all kinds, manga. I'm on a no/low buy because you guys, I have so many books. I got to read what I have. Along with whatever I find at the library. And I'm already so much looking forward to what 2023 reading life has in store. I thank you all very much for being here, for being in this community. It's been like BookTube has been such a huge blessing this year for me. Like the most fun hobby I've ever had. Again, thank you so much for watching. I will see you all again very soon.